Hi there, welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff Podcast, and welcome to Australian Summer. I'm Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu, and thank you very much, my tree lovers, for joining me again for yet another podcast. This is episode 47 for season 6. Sounds crazy to say it out loud, but it's been going for a while, and my droning voice has been filling your ears with all this bonsai stuff for a while. So thank you very much for listening in. Thank you for coming back. I want to talk in this episode of the podcast about a couple of things that are really important for me. One is about receiving advice, and how do you know specifically that what you've been told is right for you and right for your bonsai. We've all been there, all been to a group setting, a group meeting where well-intentioned people provide advice to you. It's like, how do you sort through and work out what is correct and what is not? What should you listen to and what should you not listen to? So I want to talk about that, my approach to it is, and also have got a special interview. Spoke with Oscar Jonker from Bonsai Empire, and we talked a little bit about a new course that he's got coming out, but not specifically about the course, which is very interesting because it's as you will hear, it's very different to what Bonsai Empire have been offering to the online education world. But it's talking a little bit about Shinji Suzuki and his garden over in Japan and a bit of stuff behind the scenes. So it's a really interesting little chat. So that'll be coming through for you too. And also just when something goes wrong with a bonsai pot outside of repotting season, what you should do, because I've had a real life example happen. So I'll run you through that as well. So strap yourself in, get yourself a cuppa, something cool and refreshing, and let's get into it. Righto, so receiving advice. I don't say this that you are given intentionally misleading information, or that the person that's providing information to you is doing it deceptively or anything like that. That's not. I'm not focusing on that at all, and I don't think you should look at someone who's giving you advice and think that. The message I want to portray, I suppose, is that when you are given advice, it needs to be factored in to your situation and to your tree. Okay, so if you are getting advice from somebody, well-intentioned advice, that maybe lives in a completely different climate or a different zone, as they're called over in the States, or their microclimate is very different, or their soil mix might be different, their fertilizing regime may be very different, it's well-intentioned and you take it on board and you listen to that information, but I think you've got to make sure that you only apply the correct information at the correct time to your bonsai. I've found, and this is I suppose what my entire focus is with the education I provide or the information I provide to people, I try and make their bonsai journey a little smoother than what mine was. I went through exactly what a lot of people listening to this podcast will have been through, where you'll have bought trees, you'll have worked on trees, and then they will eventually go into the recycle bin because you'll have killed them from loving them too much, from overworking them, from doing the wrong thing, from taking advice from people that maybe isn't necessarily correct. And I'll talk about a few different topics like what I've talked about recently on podcasts, like defoliation. Let's take that one for example. It's really common. A lot of people do it. Everyone has a different approach. Everyone has a different result. Sometimes it's fantastic. Sometimes it's disastrous. But the background of why it works or why it doesn't work is the important part. That's where you're going to get the benefit. And often these 2-minute conversations over a cuppa at a club meeting or wherever it is at a bonsai nursery, when you do get this information, you may not necessarily get the entire facts or the situational information that makes it super important as to why it will or won't work. If you've got a tree that's super weak, maybe hasn't been repotted for a long time, maybe the person giving the advice doesn't fertilise. They don't believe in fertilising their tree. Maybe they follow the approach of withholding nutrients to try and keep internode length short, and they don't fertilise or water quite as much as what they possibly should. focusing on the health of the tree as opposed to shorter structuring. So therefore their tree gets weaker, and when they do these things to it, it has a disastrous result. I come across it quite regularly where I'll pass on information. I'll say, well, in my situation or with what I do, based on a whole range of different parameters, which include my soil mix I use, my positioning, my watering, my feeding, my pest and disease management processes. Based on all of that information, this is what I do with a tree that's at this stage of its life. And that's the best I can do, because often you'll want a quick solution like, what should I do? This is my situation. What should I do? And that misleading or incorrect advice is free flowing. You'll come across it everywhere. You'll come across it, with people that walk through your yard. You'll come across it in an online forum. You'll come across it whenever you get more than two bonsai people together and you start discussing a tree. Then the care regime or the maintenance or the processes that are followed vary greatly. And I just want to push the point, I suppose. We're getting into a long, hot summer. All the news is firing up now about all the bushfire threats that we're going to come across and whatever. There's a lot to an Australian summer, as we all know. It comes to a really stressful point with our trees, and this is where a lot of these things can suddenly appear. Let's say you've wired a tree, a juniper or something like that. You've styled it throughout the winter period. Looks great. Spring's come around, it's growing nicely, looking good. Then all of a sudden summer gets here, we get some really hot days. Tree gets put under a fair amount of stress during that period. Things start to go wrong. Foliage starts to change colour. A branch may look like it's died off. Is it a fungal issue? Is it from rough handling on that branch? What's the cause of it? How do you nail it back? And presenting that scenario to somebody saying, here's my tree. Yesterday it was perfect. Today it's not. What's caused it? It's a very hard thing to put your finger on, and you can often find that you'll get advice that, as I said, even though it's well-meaning, it's not necessarily going to give you anything that you want or that's going to be useful to you, because the background information that's probably the most important with a scenario like that just isn't there. So I just want to say that getting advice from people, I love it. I put a tree on display and someone will come and ask me how I look after it, and then I'll be told how someone else looks after their tree. All good intention stuff, all really informative and well-meaning. But does that mean that I take that tree home and I change the way that I look after it? I don't, because I know how my trees respond, and I know that what I'm doing within my zone, within my little world that I live in, is the best that I possibly can do, and there's not much more that I can do. So I take on their advice, I listen to it. I'm not disrespectful, I'm not rude. Doesn't mean I have to change things. I just encourage you to, when you do get that advice, reach out to people, reach out to your network, take it on board. But even though it's well-meaning, well-intentioned, it might not necessarily be the correct thing for you to change the way that you're looking after your tree, or maybe it's not the right information that you're after. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I really do love the subscribers to these podcasts. It means a lot to the continuity of it, and it means a lot to me to know that I've got the support of a range of people out there that really believe in what this podcast is about. So thank you very much. And if you aren't a subscriber but you're thinking about it, you can jump on board for as little as $3 a month. And like I said, it really does go a long way to supporting the continuity of this podcast for everybody. So please consider, and if you'd like to, and if you've got the means to, then jump on board and become a bonsai lover like the rest of us. All right, I've got a special guest for everyone. I've got Oscar Jonker from Bonsai Empire. Welcome back, Oscar. Thank you for joining us again on the Bonsai Stuff podcast.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
I wanted to get Oscar back. We did do a bit of an interview talking about an app he'd released recently, and I want to talk this time more about a different type of course Oscar does a hell of a lot of stuff through Bonsai Empire through their website with different courses, as almost everyone listening to this podcast will know. There was a new one that came out relatively recently, which was very different, very different from what I've seen available online. So I just want to start by saying, I think it's very interesting, and I'm sure that everyone listening will enjoy it as well. So, Oscar, can you break it down for us a little bit and tell us about this new course that you've put together?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, it's we've done online courses for quite a while now. I think that the first one we ever did was with Bjorn Bjorholm,
Hmm.
beginner level course, and it was incredibly successful. And so, yeah, we started making more courses because students were asking for more. Most of these courses have always focused on, the techniques in bonsai. It's also the things that I think most students were looking for, like understanding when and how to prune on different tree species, etc. Um, and then at some point we did an online course with Michael Hagedorn, which was the fundamentals course, which was all about aesthetics and plant physiology and so more the understanding the why behind the techniques in bonsai, which was also a success. And then we focused on techniques for a few other courses as well. And then at some point, we had the opportunity to shoot a master class with Shinji Suzuki,
Hmm.
and then we went for. And well, like, I think most people listening to the podcast will know exactly who Shinji Suzuki is, but um,
If you don't,
he's
if you don't get onto the internet and do a search, because you'll be amazed at the
yeah.
quality of the trees.
Yeah, like he's one of the absolute top masters
Yep,
in
agreed.
Japan, and where Masahiko Kimura is very well known for inventing basically new techniques and hardcore bonsai styling techniques. I think Shinji Suzuki does a little of that as well, but he's also very much known for displaying bonsai and basically design and aesthetics, a more soft approach perhaps to bonsai. That's perhaps just my personal opinion,
No,
but
very, very high quality trees. I think all
yeah,
his trees are second to none around the world. I think he's at the very
absolutely.
pointy end of high quality bonsai. I
Yeah.
agree with you totally.
Yeah, and I think he's the one of the very few bonsai masters in Japan and maybe around the world as well who invests the same amount of time in his trees in the basically the setup of his garden and the way he displays the trees outdoors as well. So his garden is absolutely stunning.
Mm.
If you have ever been or if you have seen one of our videos perhaps or photos on social media, this is completely different from all the other bonsai gardens in Japan, which are basically working nurseries where, they stack up the trees
Mhm.
um, to have as many trees as they can in the garden. And the layout of Shinji Suzuki's garden is, it's on another level. It's just absolutely beautiful. So we had the chance to do something with him, and we started discussing with him and his team like what the topics could be. And what I had on my mind for some time was to go for more design oriented online course, so the Japanese aesthetics behind bonsai, displaying bonsai, but also garden design, because
Mhm.
his garden is so very beautiful. And so we went for that direction, and went back and forth with him. Um, Tagged along another teacher as well, which is Luis Vallejo from Spain.
Yes.
Uh, Also a well-known character because he runs a stunning museum based in Madrid, Spain. I'm not sure if you've ever been, Scott, but
No, I've never seen
uh,
I've seen photos of it. I've never been to his yard though.
yeah. So well, it reminds me a lot of it reminds me a lot of Suzuki's garden as well. I think Suzuki is also one of the inspirations for Luis Vallejo.
Mhm.
But Luis Vallejo is a landscape architect, so very well known. He does mm, huge projects, palace gardens, etc. But is also very much into bonsai. So he has a high quality bonsai collection, also very well displayed in a bonsai museum in Madrid, which is very well known. So these teachers together are, I think, a dream team if you want to talk
Mm.
about garden design and the aesthetics of displaying bonsai, both in a traditional tokonoma display, but also displaying it in your garden.
Mm.
And I think a lot of us have one or two things to learn to actually present a beautiful bonsai much better. So yeah, so that's what we went for.
Okay. So with your classes, you go from beginner right the way through to professional level
All right.
of how to make bonsai, how to build a bonsai, how to maintain it and all that sort of stuff, like with an ongoing plan. Why was it important to include this course on the setup of your garden as well? Why did you think that that's important for you to offer it to the people that are learning how to look after their bonsai?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's our duty, but I think that it's my intention was to offer a wider offer of topics, and so only focusing on techniques is at some point a little bit limited because at some point, if you went through all the courses, you will understand and know how to apply those techniques and when to apply them to different tree species. But there are softer topics that are also very important. So display is a huge one. Um, but we have all the students in our platform. They have gardens of themselves, and they have bonsai trees on tables and benches and whatever. But it's also my own frustration, perhaps, that I just couldn't really figure out how to design things in my or places in my garden that were suitable to really display a tree well. And so, yeah, I think it, yeah, and so I think it was important to have those topics as well. Like a bonsai tree can be a beautiful thing, but if you don't display it well,
Yeah, it's a
you know, it
waste.
it, it just doesn't work. Yeah, it's a
Exactly.
waste. Yeah.
Yeah, so the footage you've got in the course is absolutely beautiful. It's I was fortunate enough to get to have a look through the course, and I think that you've been very fortunate to get up close and personal with so many beautiful bonsai. That's there. I mean, just to be in the presence of some of those trees is very lucky. What was it like? You've said Shinji Suzuki's garden was beautiful. What was it like there? And was he receptive to being involved in the course? And how did you get him to say yes, considering that, as you say, this is the only platform outside of Japan where he's actually teaching? How did you get him to say yes and get across the line?
Yeah, well, it took a while, and I think as with most Japanese and Chinese masters, it's all about the relationship you have with them. So it needs time. You need to know them. They need
Mm.
to be aware of who you are. I worked with Shinji Suzuki before on doing like demonstrations in Japan, and then like I was asked to come over and film them, and then so he already knew that the quality we deliver is good enough for him to be comfortable with. And I think the biggest risk he would take is to be in front of the camera and not know beforehand what the product would be that comes out of it, right? So it all boils down to trusting me with um, well his face on our course. Um, but I think it helps that I've been in his garden a couple of times. Usually I film the garden as well, so he has seen those videos as well, of course. So yeah, I know it takes a bit of time, but so he knew me and he knew Bonsai Empire, my team, and then at some point I reached out to ask like, hey, would you be interested to perhaps do an online course together? Um, and actually, the fundamentals course that I mentioned briefly in the intro today was it was created with Michael Hagedorn, and Michael is one of the I think the first student
Yes.
of Shinji.
Yep.
So they go back a long time, and filming the fundamentals course was also partly done in the garden of Suzuki. I think we spent almost a week, um, which is 10 years ago already. But we spent about a week in the garden filming, and so I got to know Shinji Suzuki a little bit better, and I think Shinji also saw how we produced that online course, and he saw the final result as well. So I think that helped as well. Um, and then the same with Louis Vallejo. So I started out with asking Shinji Suzuki, and then also filmed the takes with him in his garden. And I had the feeling that the course or the masterclass would it be better if there were a few additional components to it, so things that a landscape designer could add, someone like Louis Vallejo. Because I also wanted to have a few very practical and um, but yeah, so I also wanted a few very practical lectures on how to actually design a garden,
Hmm.
like how to how to sit down and understand the techniques involved to draw out a garden, and that's something that Louis Vallejo could really add. So yeah, having those two teachers on board, and I think Louis Vallejo is also not someone who you just simply ask and he would say yes. So of course he also wants to be sure that it's a high quality product. But I think once he learned that Shinji Suzuki was already involved, that I think that helped
Did they
to
vet the product before you were able to release it? Did you have to get their
sure.
sign off? Yeah.
Well, no, that like we never agree beforehand that they have to sign off because that's too much of a risk for me. There's too much time and involvement to be able to have a teacher to say no, you can't do this. But of course, if there would be parts that they didn't like, we would go through unlimited circles to improve it. And so, of course, they saw the finished result. Had some feedback as well, some things that didn't come across too well, but because perhaps there's like 100 hours of video that we shot, and we only air maybe 5 hours, so
Yep.
a lot of things don't make the cut, and sometimes something was left out that they wanted back in, or the other way around.
Was there anything
So,
that was off limits, like with Shinji? Was there anything that you weren't allowed to film, weren't allowed to talk about while you were there?
no, I don't think so. Like he would never ask us, but we know that if a tree doesn't look very healthy, and I mean a tree that doesn't look very healthy would never be on the top shelves in his garden. They would be in the garden that's off limits for filming anyway. But like, would we see something like that? It wouldn't make the end result, or the end the online course anyway.
All right, so let's just
So
break. Let's stop there
yeah,
because so I've got some beautiful trees in my garden, but I've also got a section of my garden which is sort of off limits to a lot of people, which has not, I wouldn't call it rubbish, but it's got definitely what I call project trees, which
yeah,
can
exactly.
be definitely worked on. There's something for the future, and maybe they don't look, they haven't got the wow factor, and they can be a bit of a dog's breakfast. Uh, Now, be honest, did you find that project tree section in Suzuki's garden?
No, no, they're not.
It's off site.
Well, there's so many high quality trees that anything that's visible in his garden is top level. So there's just no project trees to be found there. He has a garden that's on the outskirts of the display garden, where we are allowed in, but I don't think we did any filming there. So that's for his standards are perhaps the project trees, which to me would still be the top trees.
World class,
Uh,
yeah.
and I believe, and I'm actually not quite sure, but I believe he has a second garden nearby where he has a few more uh, projects as well. And of course, any master in Japan has trees that are just not in great condition right now because they had a setback, lost a branch, or are
Of
put back
course.
in a large pot. But that is not stuff you would see in his garden.
Any weeds at his place? I can tell you I've got weeds at
No,
my
not a
place. Any
single
weeds
one.
at his place?
No, not a single one. The morning in these gardens, well, and especially Shinji Suzuki's garden, the morning starts with the students cleaning up, making sure that there's not a single leaf in the wrong place, and raking the gravel, and it's always in absolute top condition, and
How many
especially days.
students? How many students are there?
Uh, I think usually around 4 or 5. I think right now there's 5 as
Right.
well. Um, Shinji still manages to always have enough students, which can be a problem in some of the other Japanese bonsai gardens. And usually a fair amount of students from Europe or the US as well. So he always has that mix. I think for him it's also important to have English-speaking people there as well. Um, yeah.
For the tourists, for the visitors that come to the garden, is that why he wants
Yeah,
it?
exactly. And he's also more internationally oriented. So I think he does demos overseas, and he's more aware of what happens outside of Japan.
So when you were filming this thing, or any bloopers, any mishaps, anything you can tell us that happened behind the scenes that didn't make the cut? Oh, of
Uh,
course, it wouldn't make the cut, but anything happen?
um, well, we fly the drone to add some B-roll to the course. I had a crash with that. Luckily, not in one of the bonsai. Yeah, it wasn't me flying it, luckily, but I was wondering how well we were insured when that happened. But But with Shinji, not so much. He was very well prepared. He had all the old sketches from when he designed the garden and could explain us all about it. So it was meticulously prepared, and we went through quite a few rounds of preparation with him before we even flew over to Japan as well. Um, so no, I don't think there were any big bloopers there. There's the endless uhs and ahs and
Yep.
you like in this interview sometimes you just get stuck and you take a part out probably, but that happens a lot. Like I said, there's at least 100 hours produced film, which is
How long
all
does
the
it
A
take to
roll
put it together? If you film 100 hours of footage, how long to get back to 5 hours? What physical amount of time did it take you to wrap it all up?
weeks. Yeah,
Weeks,
it's
yeah.
very different from being live in front of the video. Just do a tour through a garden and post it online. This is all meticulously put together, and that's because my philosophy with the online courses at Bonsai Empire is that they all have a curriculum that's very well thought out, so that so that it becomes educational instead
Mhm.
of um, entertaining.
Yep.
Um, and so when we have all that footage, it's not like good stuff gets thrown away. So it's not like um, that that stuff is left out of the online course, which was great, but just couldn't fit in the curriculum. Like we always have a bonus section if we have other stuff that's just too interesting not to use in the curriculum. But it just needs to be edited down for it to be educational, I think.
Yep. Yeah, well, I think this course and especially the way that we display and we present our bonsai, it adds to our personal enjoyment and our appreciation of these beautiful little trees. And I think it's a beautiful course because it's very different from that educational stuff. The learning of working on the trees. So it's very important, I
Yeah.
think, for our personal enjoyment. So what are the future plans for Bonsai Empire with your online content that you guys are developing? What's next?
What's next? We have something coming up with Masahiko Kimura again. So we have. I'm not sure if you were aware, but we did a masterclass with him. I think about 5 years ago, and then there was another one 2 or 3 years ago. And with which was absolutely fascinating to make as well, because this is um, a very different setup, very much focused on techniques and advanced level techniques. So this is stuff with chainsaws and I don't know, like very complex repotting and that's really advanced level stuff. Um, but the interesting thing with the masterclass that is in production now with Masahiko Kimura is that he gave us complete access to everything. So this is mostly filmed in his workshop, but also in his working garden, so the garden that's off limits to visitors. And it's super interesting to see all the projects that he's working on, because he still keeps basically
Still
he still
very
keeps
active.
the new. Yeah, he's very active, but he also keeps inventing new stuff and new techniques, um, and he still has the energy. I think of a 20-year-old. He outpaced me a couple of times. Like one of the days we were filming, we styled a massive like a 2 meter high pine, which he wanted to change the angle and reduce in size for it to be allowed into Kokufuten. So
Mhm.
below a meter, more or less. So
Wow.
it's a reduction of almost 50%. So an extreme angle change, branches that had like old 50-year-old branches that had to be bent down and how to do that. And so we went through a full day of doing all that with me and my team and interpreters. So at the end of the day, I'm tired. I just want to maybe have a dinner. Usually also with the entire team and Mr. Kimura um, and then after dinner, I want to go back to my hotel, make sure that I secure all the footage we shot, and I just want to sleep. And then after dinner, he was like, "Yeah, we can repot tomorrow, but I feel like doing it now. Let's do it now." And it's like before anyone could say like, "No, no, no, let's do it tomorrow." We're already back in the car, in the car back to his garden, late night repotting the
Wow.
tree, which is also a massive repotting. So, well, all that stuff is coming up, but another fascinating project.
That's awesome. Well, Oscar, it's as always, mate. It's been great to catch up. Great to talk to you. Great for what you're doing for the bonsai community in that you're making us better and stronger and educated. Education is the most important thing we can get for our bonsai, and it'll help us all along our bonsai journey. So, thank you for your time. Thanks for coming on Bonsai Stuff Podcast, and I look forward to the next time we get to catch up.
Nice. Thanks for having me over, Scott.
I have a number of trees, as you know, hundreds of the bloody things. Anyway, I've got one in particular that caused a bit of an issue for me recently. It's a nice little olive in a very tight pot, goes edge to edge, and I'll put my hand up and say, what happened to the tree is my fault. It's nothing to do with the tree, nothing to do with the manufacturer of the pot or anything like that. Anyway, went out there recently, had a look at the pot, and the pot's cracked. It's exploded. Pushed out one side. And I'd flagged this tree for repotting. It should have been repotted because I know the root ball on it is quite aggressive. I also know that the pot, edge to the nabari, to the base of the tree, is, there's only maybe a centimetre either side of the tree for soil to be in there. So I know this thing has been too long. It's been 3 years since it was repotted. Should have done it. I was hoping I could get one more year out of it just to, get some really nice, manageable, controlled ramification on the tree. And as always, it lets me down. I let myself down. I let the tree down. And so seeing this tree having exploded in the pot, tree is still very healthy. It was a nice pot. It's a shame. I would have liked to have put the tree back into that pot for another run. But, an upside is that I get to go out now and look at purchasing a new pot, I suppose. Not that I needed to, I wanted to, but I get the chance to. So what do you do when you break a pot? Really common. With change of season, we get lots of wind. Trees can get blown off. I do tie my trees in very well to my pots. So when something like this happens, and half the pot disintegrates, I've still got the option to keep that root ball nice and solid intact. So a couple of options you've got for a tree that's pot is broken. Take it out of the existing pot that it's in. Try and not disturb the root ball. In fact, if the pot's buggered and it's not going to be able to be used again for any reason, or if it's not an important pot and it's already cracked, I just break it off with a hammer. I'll get rid of the pot, but I'll leave the tie-in wires that I had around that root ball still around the root ball. I don't remove those because the tree might have just been repotted a few months ago. It could have been a year ago. It could have been 3 years ago like this one, but I don't adjust those wires until I actually get to the repotting process, because if it's freshly potted, taking those wires off, you're going to lose a lot of that substrate that's around the root ball that's starting to develop, and it'll help keep it intact. If it's been 3 years since it happened, those wires are going to be swallowed up inside the root ball, and taking them out is going to start damaging the root ball. And I don't want any root work to be done as we head in towards the summer period for our trees. It's that stressful time. Least amount of things that you can do to the tree during those really hot periods, the better it's going to be. So I'll look to leave it alone entirely as I can. So then you can take that root ball, you can slip it into a black plastic pot, put another couple of tie-in wires in there, put some medium around it, a little bit of sphagnum moss on top, tie it up, put it back on the bench. Next repotting season, done. It's all fixed. You can sort it out. What I've chosen to do with this tree is to get some tape, some electrical tape, and run it around the outside of the pot a number of times to just hold that pot together. It's not ideal. I don't like outside air getting to the root ball because it will start to kill the roots. So I find that I've got to really compact that broken edge of the pot in as tight as I can and put the tape on there pretty hard to make sure that there's no gaping holes between the broken pot and the existing pot that's still on the tree. But for me, looks ugly, looks ugly as sin, but it's very effective, and it means that I definitely know that tree now is flagged for repotting come next year. So I strongly recommend that. If you can get away with just taping the pot back together until whatever time is appropriate for you to repot that tree, you'll find that it'll be enough for you to get through that process without disturbing the tree, without losing or damaging root system at all for the tree. It's a nice, easy way to get out of hot water. Well, folks, hope you enjoyed that. That was an interesting chat with Oscar. It's great doing an interview with someone who's on the other side of the world in Amsterdam when you're in sunny old Melbourne. We sat down. It was evening for me, and it was breakfast time for him. So it's nice doing that, making the world a smaller place. And it's interesting, I think, having a chat with someone who's been able to get behind the scenes and see maybe things that you don't actually get to see, and just have a little bit of a frank conversation, because it's always interesting, I reckon, that hearing how the professionals run their businesses at that really pointy end. And Shinji Suzuki is, in my opinion, one of the best. The quality of his trees and his care and health of those trees, and the way that he approaches bonsai full stop, I really love. I really respect it. I think it's nice that I was able to have that chat and hear some inside information. I don't know Shinji Suzuki from a bar or soap. I've never met him. Came across him once at the Green Club in Tokyo, but never got the ability to talk to him or anything like that. So it was actually nice hearing that information. I hope you found it informative as well as maybe just a gentle reminder as we head towards a stressful time. You will see issues with your trees if something's happened to them in the past. Summer does that. Summer's shocking. Summer's really hard on the trees, and it brings a lot of these things to the fore. Just with the information you receive, take it on board for what it is. Don't drastically change your environmental situation. If things are going great and it's just one little mishap that you've had happen with your trees, I wouldn't suggest drastically reinventing the wheel for what you do, but maybe just work your way through those things and see if what you've been told can be applied to your situation, or maybe dig a bit deeper, ask a bit more stuff, the environmental stuff, the management side of things when it comes to the root system, all that stuff. And most importantly, when someone gives you advice, make sure that their trees are of a standard that you aspire to have your trees at. There's no point taking advice from someone whose trees you look at and go, they're half dead. That's not what I want with my trees. Why would I want that to happen to my trees? Anyway, well-intentioned, nothing malicious about it, but just take it on board and process as it sits for you. Next week, we'll be talking about decandling. It's that time. Yes, I'm sorry. Anyone that doesn't have Japanese black pines will be bored stupid. No, you won't. You'll definitely get something out of it. Having talked recently about the candle cutting and decandling process, I want to talk a little bit more about decandling because it is very timely. It's going to be a very busy time of the year for anyone with black pines to make sure that we keep taking them to that next level. And one of the things we're going to focus on next week is going to be when not to decandle, which is a really important part. Stay well. Make sure you give your trees a cuddle for me and spend time with them. Watch the watering at the moment. Always err on the side of caution as you're going into the hotter periods, and make sure that fertiliser starts getting removed from the trees. It shouldn't be topped up again now as we're heading in towards the hotter period. Make sure that you start to back it off a little bit. And if you've got the tea bags on there like I do, start removing them as you start walking around the yard, because it's no point encouraging that new, delicate, soft growth as we get to these extremes of hot weather. Thanks for sticking around. Love you all. Till next time, happy bonsai.